this opening olio is Kathy Culmer. Texan to the core, Kathy Culmer has spent most of her adult lifetime utilizing storytelling and her writing to help other people live deeper spiritual lives. Her new book, called On the Wings of Prayer, is the kind of book where you can open at any given page and read something that will help the world seem a little lighter, your burden less heavy. Kathy is one of those remarkable people who can teach without preaching. Please welcome to the stage, Kathy Culmer.
Doing? I can't assure you that these stories are going to help you lead deeper spiritual lives, more spiritual lives, but hopefully they will lift your spirits. I do tell some biblical stories. I tell other kinds of stories, but I like to tell a lot of folk tales. I like to tell them for three reasons. I like to tell them for the truth that's in them, for the way they tell the truth, and for sometimes the fun we can have on the way to the truth. So I'm going to invite you to join me in telling this story. It's a participatory story. And I'll give you a couple of cues to let you know when to come in and what to do. Y'all good? Okay. First cue looks like this. When you hear that cue, I give you the cue. You don't have to cue back. But when I give you the cue, I want you to say, talk, talk. Let's try it. Very good, very good. This is a storytelling audience, so you know that. You know how it works. Second cue looks like this. Walk, walk, walk. Run, run. Let's try it. Hey. Okay, you got it. All right. So those are your cues, and we're going to start out, we're going to snap together here on the same beat. A long time ago, and a long way from here, this story comes to us from a country called Ghana in West Africa. The people who first told it were called the Ashanti. A farmer went out to his farm to dig some yams to take to market to sell. But whoa, while that farmer was out in his field digging yams, all of a sudden, the yam started to. And the yam looked at the farmer and said, "Well, at last you come around. Why, never once before did you come to water me, weed me, or feed me. And now you show up with that digging stick. You better leave me alone." When the farmer heard that, the farmer looked around to see who it was that had spoken to him, and the only thing he saw was his old cow. And she was just chewing her cud. Now the farmer saw no one else there, so he said to the cow, he said, "Did you say something?" And the cow just kept on chewing her cud. Now the farmer's cow had nothing to say, but not very far away there sat the farmer's dog, and just then the farmer's dog started to. The dog started to. And the dog said, "Hey, it wasn't your cow that spoke to you, it was your yam." And he said, "You better leave him alone." Well, when the farmer heard that, it made the farmer mad. You know why? He ain't like his dog's tone of voice. Besides that, his dog had never spoken to him before. So the farmer went to cut a branch off the tree so he could switch that dog, but then all of a sudden the tree started to. And the tree said, "Put that branch down." So the farmer went to put the branch down, but then the branch started to. And the branch said, "Put me down gently." So he put it gently on the stone, and the stone started to. And the stone said, "Get that thing off me." When the farmer heard that, that did it for the farmer. The farmer threw down his digging stick and the farmer started to. And he ran. And he ran and he kept running until he met a fisherman with a fish trap full of fish on his head. When the fisherman with the fish trap full of fish on his head saw the farmer running, he called out and said, "Whoa, good brother, why do you run so today?" And the farmer stopped just long enough to tell him, what had happened. And the farmer said to him, "I was out in my field digging my yams when my yams started to." Oh yeah, you pay attention, you learn the parts because you're going to help me do this next time, okay? "I was out in the field digging my yams when my yams started to." And the yam said, "You better leave me alone." Then my dog started to. And the dog said, "You better listen to the yam." Well, I went to cut a branch off the tree when the tree started to. And the tree said, "Put that branch down." So I went to put the branch down, but then the branch started to. And the branch said, "Put me down gently." So I put it gently on the stone, and then the stone started to. And the stone said, "Yes." So the fisherman with the fish trap full of fish on his head said, "Now let me get this right. You say you out running because a yam, a dog, a tree, a branch, and a stone were talking. Is that right?" But just then, the fisherman's fish trap started to. And the fish trap said, "Well, did he take it off?" "Ah!" The fisherman yelled, threw his fish trap down to the ground. Now the fisherman and the farmer started to. And they ran. And ran, and they kept running until they met a weaver with a bundle of cloth on his way to market to sell that cloth. When the weaver with the bundle of cloth saw the two of them running, he called out and said, what? You can say it with me. "Whoa, good brothers, why do you run so today?" And they stopped long enough to tell that story. The farmer said, "It's like this. I was out in my field digging my yams." This is when y'all have to come in this time, okay? "I was out in my field digging my yams when my yams started to." And the yam said, "Leave me alone." Then the dog started to. And the dog said, "Better listen to the yam." Well, I went to cut a branch off the tree when the tree started to. And the tree said, "Put that branch down." So I went to put the branch down, but then the branch started to. And the branch said, so I put it gently on the stone, then the stone started to. And the stone said, and the fisherman said, and my fish trap started to. And the fish trap said, "Did he take it off?" So the weaver with this bundle of cloth said, "Get out of here. You don't expect me to believe all that, now do you?" But just then, the weaver's bundle of cloth started to. And the cloth said, "You do the same thing if it happened to you." "Ah!" he yelled, threw his bundle of cloth down to the ground. Now the weaver, the fisherman, and the farmer started to. And they ran. And they ran, and they kept running until they came to the place where there was a man out there in the river taking a bath. Now the man in the river taking a bath saw the three of them running, and he called out and said, what? "Whoa, good brothers, why do you run so today?" And they stopped long enough to tell him why they were out running, of course. The farmer started out. The farmer said, "I was out in my field digging my yams when my yams started to." And the yam said, then my dog started to. And the dog said, "Well, I went to cut a branch off the tree when the tree started to." And the tree said, so I went to put the branch down, but then the branch started to. And the branch said, so I put it gently on the stone, then the stone started to. And the stone said, then the fisherman said, my fish trap started to. And the fish trap said, "Did he take it?" Then the weaver said, my cloth started to. And the cloth said, yeah, sort of like that. So the fella in the river taking a bath said, "Come on, fellas, you can tell me. It's cool. I won't tell anybody your secret." But just then, the river started to. And the river said, "And what would you do? What would you do?" "Ah!" he yelled, jumped up out of the river, and they all started to. And they ran. And they ran, and they kept on running. They ran to the village. They ran through the village. They kept running until they came to the place where the chief lived, so that they could tell him about these things that were going on. When they got to the chief's servant brought his stool and sat it out in the courtyard so that the chief could sit and listen to the complaints of his citizens. One by one, they came forward to tell their stories. You know who went first? The farmer, after all, it was his story to tell. And the farmer said to the chief, Chief, I know you're going to find this hard to believe. Chief, I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, heard it with my own ears. But Chief, it really did happen. It's like this, Chief. I was out in my field digging my yams when all of a sudden my yams started to. And the yam said. Then my dog started to. And the dog said. Well, I went to cut a branch off the tree when the tree started to. And the tree said. So I went to put the branch down, but then the branch started to. And the branch said. So I put it gently on the stone, and the stone started to. And the stone said. And the fisherman, who was almost out of breath, said, yeah. And my fish trap started to. And the fish trap said. Y'all forgot, huh? Then he take it off. Then the weaver with the bundle of cloth said, my cloth started to. And the cloth said, do this. And this other fellow who had been out in the river taking a bath said, oops, Chief, I'm so sorry. I was out in the river taking a bath when the river started to. And the river said, and what would you do? And what would you do? Well, the chief sat there. And he listened for as long as he could take it. And finally the chief said, stop it. Stop it right now. That's just a whole bunch of nonsense. Why the nerve of you coming here, getting in my face, telling me that this one said this and that one said that, telling me this and this said that and that. Why, that's just a whole bunch of gossip. And no good thing ever comes from gossip, right? Now you better go on back and go to work before I put you in jail for disturbing the peace. And the chief turned around to go inside. The chief said, the nerve of these people. Why, this is the very reason there's always some kind of confusion going on in the community. But as the chief started to walk away, all of a sudden, the chief's stool started to. And the chief's stool said, fantastic, Chief, isn't it? And it's all because of that talking yam. And that's the end of that. A little story called Talk Talk. Now, communications is very important. Would you all agree? It could be the difference between war and peace, relationships in our homes, outside in the community, wherever. Communication is important. What we say as well as how we listen. Here's a little story, a little Ethiopian folktale to illustrate my point. Now, the widow Yemswitch was a good old woman, but for a long time she'd been hard of hearing. Now, the widow had a small flock of sheep that she tended, and one day her sheep wandered off. I guess you could say she lost her sheep and couldn't tell where to find them. So the widow went off in search of her flock of sheep. And as she was looking for them, she met up with the farmer Mulageta. Oh, Mr. Mulageta, she said. Oh, Mr. Mulageta, have you seen my sheep today? Now, the farmer Mulageta was a good old man, but he too was hard of hearing. So he never heard what she said. But he'd been out in his field plowing all day, so he thought that she must have been asking him about his plowed fields. So he answered her and said, oh, Wizero Yemswitch, which means widow Yemswitch, I worked very hard today. And then he pointed in the direction of his plowed fields. Now, the widow had not heard a word he said, but she thought he must have been pointing her in the direction where she might find her lost sheep. So she was very grateful to Mr. Mulageta, and she said, oh, thank you, Mr. Mulageta. And if I find my sheep, I just might bring you one as your reward. They bowed politely to one another, and each went on their way. Well, wouldn't you know, as luck would have it, and as things go like this in stories, just over that hill, the widow Yemswitch found her flock of lost sheep. She was so grateful to the farmer Mulugeta for telling her exactly where she could find her sheep before some wolves or some other animals got them and ate them. But as she was looking them over, she noticed that one of her lambs had an injured leg. And she decided that she would give that lamb to Mr. Mulugeta as a reward for helping her recover her lost sheep. So after the widow had returned her sheep to her house, she took the lamb in her arms and went to the farmer Mulugeta's house. When she arrived, he was preparing himself dinner, for he too was a widower and had been for many years. She went inside and said, "Mr. Mulugeta, thank you. Thank you for telling me exactly where I might find my lost sheep. And look, I have brought this lamb to you as a reward and as a thank you." Now, the farmer Mulugeta didn't understand the words she said, but he did notice that that lamb had an injured leg, and he thought that she had come to accuse him of injuring her lamb's leg. "Oh, no," he said, "I would never do anything to injure your lamb's leg. Why, I've been working in my field all day. I never saw your lamb." Well, the widow was finally able to make out a word that he said, but it was the word no. And she thought he was saying that that lamb was not good enough reward for him. She says, "Mr. Mulugeta, you're just a greedy old man. Why, this lamb is plenty good enough reward for you. You didn't go and find the sheep. You just pointed me in the direction where I might go and look for them." And she tried to force the lamb on him. And he continued to refuse, arguing, saying that he would not pay for this injured lamb. The two of them continued to argue back and forth, saying all kinds of foolish things, none of which mattered because neither one knew what the other was saying. However, they were causing quite a disturbance, and finally the police came by and decided that they would take the widow and the widower to court and have the matter decided by a judge. So they took them into the courtroom of the wisest and fairest justice in the land, Justice Yasu. Justice Yasu was known far and wide for being wise and for being fair, but he too was hard of hearing. And on top of that, he was nearly blind. Therefore, he did not render any decisions based on anything, the way it looked or the way it sounded, and that is how he maintained his reputation for being so fair. Each of them came forward to explain their position. The widow came forward and she said, "Your Honor, I had lost my sheep and couldn't tell where to find them. Mr. Mulugeta pointed the direction where I could go to find him. I found my lambs and I brought him this lamb as his reward. It's plenty fair enough a reward for him. He's just a greedy old man." When she was done, she stepped aside and the farmer Mulugeta came forward and spoke very quietly and said, "Your Honor, I'm just a hard-working old man. I would never bother anybody. I'd been working in my fields all day, and this woman comes and accuses me of injuring her lamb's leg. I never saw that lamb, and I never would hurt such a creature." Now the judge tried his best to make out a word they were saying, but he couldn't make out one. And he peered at them until finally he was able to determine that this was a man and a woman. But as for that lamb in the woman's arms, he thought that was a child. Now, having rendered rulings on such matters before, he had determined that this was a man, a husband, and a wife coming to get a divorce, and they wanted him to decide who would get custody of the child. So the judge asked one question: "How many years have you two been married?" Now the widow strained and tried her best to make out some of what he was saying, but the only part she heard was the "how many." And she thought he was asking her how many sheep she had. And she answered enthusiastically, 20, Your Honor. Well, the judge finally heard something. And when he heard 20, his mind was made up. He said, this is a disgrace and a shame. You two have been married for 20 long years and you haven't learned how to get along together yet. You're going to have to do better. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to go home and make a better home for this child. And if you don't, I will surely put you in jail. That is my decision. Case closed. The judge got up and left. Well, neither one of them knew what he had said. So it was up to the bailiff after this was all done to help them figure out what the judge had said, to realize what he said. And finally, when the widow was able to understand some of it, she says, we have to learn to live together? Well, we're not married. And the bailiff said, well, then you better get married. Because if you don't, the judge will surely put you in jail as he has said. So that night, the widow Yemswitch and the farmer Mulugeta found a priest and were married. And since the widow was a good cook, the farmer Mulugeta a hard-working man. And since neither one of them knew a word that the other was saying, they lived happily ever after.